But we begin with today's big story. Harken back to Saturday night of the NCAA Hockey National Championship game, Minnesota and Quinnipiac. It goes to overtime in just 10 seconds into the extra frame. The Bobcats score after scoring late in the third period to force OT. Minnesota's national championship drought extends to 20 years as Quinnipiac wins its first ever NCAA Hockey National Championship. For much more on that game, Minnesota hockey, and Big Ten hockey as a whole, we say hello to Big Ten hockey analyst Paul Caponigri. Hey, Cappy, let's start with the aftermath of that loss by Minnesota. Bob Motzko called it a, quote, crusher. You were there in Tampa, saw and interviewed Motz, talked to some of the players afterwards. What were those emotions like?
I mean, just clear devastation. You don't really have words. I mean, I guarantee they don't remember anything they said from Saturday night after that. And there was just getting back to the end of the game, there was just a weird feeling that you hadn't felt about the Gophers all season. You hadn't seen even when they lost to Michigan a couple times, it didn't look like that. And I think I talked about it a couple times during the year how I thought they were the best team, but you don't know how they're going to react in a moment at the end when you're chasing a national championship. You're 3 minutes away from it, and the way it ended with that overtime. I mean, it was just so wild. I mean, this was a set play you're looking at right there, and set plays work maybe like 4% of the time, maybe in hockey. It's just so hard, the timing, and for it to just go off perfectly like that. And a lot of people probably hadn't sat down in their seats yet when that happened. So I just think, along with giving up a late goal and then that happening so quick, I just think they were so in shock. And you saw Brock Faber, I mean, the heart and soul captain, you saw him crying on the ice. It was just very sad. In sports moments, I don't know if it gets much sadder and how it happened so quickly at the end.
Now, Paul, you give a lot of credit to Quinnipiac because even after falling behind 2-0, they never wavered. They were the better conditioned team late. They were the more aggressive team late. Bob Motzko was asked about his team's approach after they took the 2-0 lead. He said that sitting back was not, quote, by design. But this is a team that offensively was as talented as anybody in the country. They mustered just 15 shots on goal in that game, almost nothing at all in the third period. What did you see?
Yeah, I mean, I saw that. It just was very. They went into it a bit. I don't want to say, like I said, they didn't mean to. They didn't want to go into a defensive shell, but that's what it looked like. 2 shots in the third period. They did have late in the second. Jimmy Snuggerud had a perfect chance, but the puck rolled on him and he shot it over the net. If that puck is flat, he's burying that under the bar. It's a 3-1 game, and I think we're talking a whole different situation here. And then the penalty. The penalty was the key play. Cooley got a penalty that was at best questionable. It was 2 guys were tussling that gave them a power play, and then they pulled their goalie to make it 6-on-4. They didn't score on that, but the penalty just expired when they got to that. It was a 6-on-5 goal. They pulled, so a great move by Rand Pecknold to do that, gutsy play. But it was very strange to see that. And like I said, just the unknown of being in that situation where you're up a goal late to win a national championship, and maybe it just got too big. I never got to that spot in a game, so at least at that level. So I can't tell you how hard it is personally, but man, tough. But you have to give Quinnipiac credit. They did not, when they got down 2-0, they did not quit, because they're not known for scoring a ton of goals against the good teams this year. And to do what they did to come back against, I thought, the best team in the country, is a well-deserved win.
So Quinnipiac ends Minnesota's season. There'll be a lot of discussion about exactly how you categorize and describe Minnesota's season, because it was national championship or bust. Bobcats also took out Michigan in the national semifinals. What's your biggest takeaway from Michigan's season, most of which was played under Brandon Naurato as an interim head coach before he officially got the job right before the Frozen Four?
Honestly, I'd say it's a pretty good, great success. If you look back to what you just talked about, Brandon Naurato gets the job in August, which means recruiting's done. Most of your players are on campus within a week, or maybe they already are all on campus. You lost the Owen Power, Matty Beniers, Kent Johnson, Thomas Bordelot. I mean, all these high-end top draft picks. You got some new guys, but you got to remold everything, and you're doing it with a new coaching staff or a new head coach with an interim tag, which means, he's playing for his coaching future. To make it to a Frozen Four, to win the Big Ten playoff, it's pretty darn good. Great. They had all the talent, but that doesn't always come together easily. And for Brandon Naruto to do what he did and get to the Frozen Four, and I think a lot of people thought they were the favorites to come out of that first game too. So I would say it is a very good season, a very successful season, and it's some permission to build off, depending on who comes back and whatnot.
Yeah, that's the big question. Adam Fantilli, obviously the Hobie Baker Award winner, is expected to be the second overall pick in this summer's draft. We saw Luke Hughes already signing. He is off to the NHL, so this team could look very, very different next season. Ohio State was the third of 4 teams to win at least one NCAA game this year. Why does this program, Cappy, and you know the program very well having played there, right, and the head coach, Steve Rollick, who you didn't play underneath, but you know very well, why do they seem to keep flying under the radar?
I think it's a lot like those other teams, like a Quinnipiac. They don't get too many of the high-end first round, second round blue chip recruits. I mean, they had one of their probably best recruits, in a long while, in Mason Lorai 2 years ago. And look how great he was for them, second round pick. And now he is signed into the NHL. He's with Boston. He'll be there next year. He's playing in the AHL to finish this season. But when you don't have the big glamorous, big splash recruits that, these freshman stars that are amazing across the Big Ten, especially, you kind of go, and they're not a flashy offensive team. They play with a lot of structure, but can score a ton of goals too. I just think it's unbelievable, the consistency that Coach Rollick does it with. And so, like, when you're consistent, people just assume, and they kind of, take you for granted a little bit. And I guess, you almost take that if you're him, because that means you're doing a really good job. That's, I think, the biggest thing is they're not getting the Adam Fantillis, the Matthew Nyes, the Logan Cooley's. They're doing it with some really good college hockey players, and some now going on to the NHL. Jakob Dobestein with Montreal. McWard signed a free agent deal with Vancouver. He's played 2 games, scored a goal in his second game. So they're just doing it in a different way, and it's not as much of like a big headline.
Who knows, had Quinnipiac not been in existence, could have had 3 teams in the Frozen Four, 2 playing maybe for the national championship. Obviously, Quinnipiac knocking off Minnesota, Michigan, and Ohio State. It's a similar story for Penn State, isn't it, with Guy Gadowski, similar to what we talked about with Ohio State. They continue year after year to factor inside the Big Ten, to be an NCAA contender. How are they doing it every season?
Well, I mean, they have the facilities and the playing at Pagula. I think everyone sees that. Like, that's a place you want to go. That's just a terrific school. The atmosphere there, the hockey team is big time on campus at Penn State. And Guy Gadowski recruits a certain kind of player. You can tell, guys that like to skate up and down, shoot the puck from all over. I mean, these guys come in and it's like, good players over good players, but they look very similar to each other. And that style that he's garnered has been very successful. This year was very strange for them. They got off to a great start, 10-0 in non-conference play, struggled late, then had 19 days between the end of their season to the NCAA tournament, and then were phenomenal against Michigan Tech, 8-0. And then, we're minutes away from beating Michigan to get to the Frozen Four. So, the Big Ten and Penn State, he's going to continue doing his thing. I think that's what I love about Guy. There's no magic potion. He puts it out there. He knows what types of teams he has. And I think the more success they have, maybe the bigger possible recruits, and recruiting out of Pennsylvania now is a successful thing. I couldn't say that much when I was playing. Now, Pennsylvania, Logan Cooley is a Pittsburgh guy. So if he starts getting guys like him coming out of that area, that could even upgrade Penn State a little more.
Now, Cappy, Michigan State didn't make the NCAA tournament this year, but there's no arguing the fact that it was an unqualified success. First season under Adam Nightingale, especially at the beginning of the year. He clearly got in. His culture sank into that team right away. What's the outlook for the Spartans in year number 2 of the Nightingale era?
Yeah, well, I think now there's going to be a little more expectation. I think last year was he talked about laying his foundation of his beliefs and the culture that he wants to build. And now he'll have guys there that have done it for a year. And then he's got some nice recruits. He's got a goaltender coming in, freshman from the USA program, Augustine. I don't know, Dylan St. Cyr did a great job for them this year as a 6th-year guy. He'll be gone. We'll see if a freshman can do that. You never know what you're going to get with freshmen. Sometimes they're great. Sometimes they struggle. They got a couple guys from the transfer portal. Red Savage, a guy from Miami, Ohio, was one of the prize guys out of the portal, and Adam Nightingale's done a really good job there. Partially why they had a lot of success last year is they were able to get into there and get some guys. The Big Ten Conference now, from top to bottom in coaching, I'll put them up against anybody, and not just in their coaching, but their recruiting. And now with all these schools and their resources to go along with these coaches, Michigan State's going to be, I think they're ready now to take that jump. I don't know, to the top of the conference, but definitely to build up on those standings.
Nice work by you there, professional television segue. Let's talk coaching, because the biggest storyline this offseason, outside of what happens coming into next year with the transfers, the addition of Mike Hastings takes over for Tony Granato at Wisconsin. Hastings was remarkably successful at Minnesota State. Before his arrival, they had 2 20-win seasons in the previous 16 years. He does it every single year that he's there for a decade. And Cappy, he's a guy you know well. You played for him with the Omaha Lancers for 3 years. What's his immediate impact on a really proud Wisconsin program that struggled more than we expected as of late?
Yeah, it's going to be huge. It's funny. If I finally got a text from him, I had congratulated him, but he probably had 8 million congratulation texts on that. But what he brings to that program is accountability and the experience, and he has that back track record that people are going to listen. He's proven that track record. So it's come in and join his train, or do it his way, or you're not going to be successful. And I don't mean that in a way like my way or the highway. I just think he's proven himself in the past where his way works. Now it's going to be a little different in terms of I think recruiting is going to be different, right? Because at Wisconsin, he's going to be looking a little more for those blue chip guys. We saw in the past with, Tony did it great with Cole Caulfield and guys like that. They won a Big Ten championship 3 years ago. But he was used to getting some of the older, mature guys, the 20, 21-year-olds, to come in at Mankato. So I think it's going to be a little different that way. But he's from my experience, he's very hard, very demanding, but he's very fair. He expects it from everybody. But then he's also a very funny guy when you're away from the rink. He is the funniest storyteller I have ever met in my life. I'm okay with admitting that. He can know that. That's fine. But he's a great mix of, he's hard and demanding of his players, everybody from the star player to number 27 on your roster. But he's also a funny guy away from the rink where you can kind of be friends with him. And he's good at separating the two. So it's going to be, like I said last with Michigan State, this conference now is loaded with coaching. And we thought it was hard this year, the Big Ten. I don't see it. It's going to get even harder. And I guess that's a good thing. And the parity is going to be great. And it's exciting to see what the future is.
Interesting you bring up recruiting. Todd Knott, his longtime assistant at Minnesota State, turned down the head coaching job there. Now, it's not official, but the rumors are that he will join Hastings at Wisconsin. Right. And if he does, that is a huge get. All right, Cap, we got about 60 seconds left. Let's touch on the seventh and final team inside the Big Ten, that being Notre Dame. Not a great year for Jeff Jackson and the Irish. Yeah. What are the storylines we should be following in South Bend?
The biggest one is Ryan Bishel's coming back for his 5th year, and it makes a ton of sense because his first 3 years he didn't, he maybe played 15 games. He didn't play really at all his freshman year. Shared the net, lost it from injury to Matt Galita, then shared it again the previous year with Dylan St. Cyr. So last year was his first time as a full-time #1 goaltender, and man, he thrived. And so the fact that he's coming back, they have that foundation to build off of. And then you have Jeff Jackson. He's bringing Trevor Janicki's coming back for a 5th year. He's got 3 or 4 kids coming from the U.S. development program, including another Slaggert. He'll be the 3rd one in, Carter, I believe. So, like I said, this is be 7 teams in the conference. There's going to be no breaths ever, and there really wasn't last year. Wisconsin beat everybody too, but it is going to be difficult. And Ryan Bischel leads the way as he was the 2nd team All-American. He's going to be the preseason goaltender of the year by far, I think, in the Big Ten.
Big Ten Network hockey analyst Paul Caponigri on all things ice worthy of discussion. Cappy, we appreciate the time. A well-deserved vacation, I hope, for you right now. We'll see you back in Chicago sometime soon.
Sounds good, Rick. Thanks a lot.
It's the play you dream about as a kid. You come to the dish, the bases are loaded, a home run wins it for your team in the bottom of the last, and it's exactly what Jordyn Rudd did for Northwestern as the Wildcats knock off Penn State 5-2 thanks to that walk-off grand slam in the bottom of the 7th on Sunday afternoon. Welcome back to Big Ten Today and the big interview. You may have guessed our next subject, the woman who hit that home run, Northwestern catcher Jordyn Rudd. Where else would we start, Jordyn, but with that walk-off? What was your approach coming to the plate in that situation? You know exactly what's at stake.
My approach was pretty simple, honestly. I kind of just walked up there and knew that I had Hannah Katie behind me, and no one would want to face. She's on a tear right now, so my thought when I approached my at-bat was just be calm and attack a really good pitch. Don't chase out of the zone.
Were you looking for any kind of specific pitch? Because it looked like the pitch that you hit, you kind of knew was coming.
Yeah, that was the one I wanted. So it worked out well.
Exactly in the zone where you like it as well. Walk-off grand slams are a rarity. Any type of walk-off homer is a rarity. Nonetheless, a grand slam. Do you recall having one before?
I don't really know if I recall any of it. A lot of times I tend to forget a lot of stuff in the past. I'm kind of more in the present moment. But this moment was really fun for our team, and we were really excited about it. And everyone on the bases was just cheering for me. So it was really great hearing their encouragement up to bat.
Yeah, what's that feel like for someone who has never had that opportunity as you circle the bases, especially in that situation where everybody's now out of the dugout waiting for you at home plate, and you know the reaction that you are going to get when you step on the dish?
I mean, it's a feeling that I would love to feel every single day. I think it's amazing, and knowing that my teammates are just as excited as I am and they are cheering me on, it's amazing, and I loved every second of it.
Now, that walk-off came after a record-setting run performance on Saturday. You scored 24 runs in a run rule victory on Saturday, so it's obviously a team-wide thing right now with the bats. What is everyone doing so well at the plate?
I think our coaches actually are really preparing us very well. I mean, they gave us a tough schedule to start the year with, and that really helped us prepare and figure out what we needed to each individually work on and work on as a team. And that was just getting bases, and that's something that we've really emphasized, and everyone's really taken personally to do.
So it wasn't just a great weekend for you guys. It was a great week, because I go back to the middle of last week and the win over Illinois, another run rule victory in a game in which the team has 6 homers from 6 different players, and 2 of those homers are hit by first years, Kelsey Nader and Kansas Robinson, who are obviously big contributors. What's the relationship like between first-year players and either seniors or graduate students, the vets like you, Danielle Williams, Nikki Cochran, Maeve Nelson, and others?
Actually, it's pretty funny because they walked in and they did not miss a beat. They were ready to go, and they were exciting. And they bring a young, fresh energy to our team, especially for a lot of us older ones. And we've really made an effort to get to know them and understand them. And I've gotten to watch them actually grow up before they got here. So it's pretty funny and pretty surreal that they're here now and we get to play together. So it's really exciting to watch them grow, and we love getting to know them, and we're excited to see where their careers will go.
It sounds like they came in very confident, feeling like they could be contributors from the start. Do you remember back to when you first stepped on campus and whether you felt that way?
I remember stepping on campus being really nervous, honestly. I mean, I think everyone is when you first get to a new place. And I just remember our seniors encouraging us, and that's what we've really tried to do for them is be the same type of people we had when we were freshmen. Encourage them to be themselves, encourage them to have fun and step up and be leaders on the field. It doesn't matter your age, and I think that's something they've really taken and run with.
And they obviously enjoy that leadership that is provided by players like you and your battery mate, Danielle Williams. You and I were talking before we started this interview, and I told you last year when Danielle was with us, the one thing she did not want to talk about was herself. And you said that makes a lot of sense. She is a selfless, a very humble teammate. So I'll ask you to talk about Danielle Williams. And first, from a battery mate perspective, what are her pitches like, the pitches that you catch on a game-by-game basis?
She has a lot of confidence in her defense, which is what makes her pitching even better than it already is. And I think being able to catch her is amazing. The amount of confidence our team has in her and the amount of confidence she has in us is what really makes her, the pitcher she is. She trusts me to block a ball in the dirt. She trusts her changeup every pitch she throws. And I think it's something that's really exciting and really unique about her that I don't think, every pitcher out there has like she does. And I think it's really awesome. It's really awesome.
What's your relationship like off the diamond?
Her and I are basically like sisters. We hang out all the time. We live together for a short period, and I think our relationship will be the same throughout the rest of our lives.
Where would you rate her changeup among all the pitches that you've ever seen as a catcher and or as a hitter?
I think it's the best. I'm obviously a little biased since I'm catching her, but out of all the changeups I've seen, she hides it really well, and I think it's a hard pitch to recognize, and I think she has one of the best changeups in the game for sure.
It's amazing. You watch her pitch, and she can throw it in any situation on any count. 3-2, bases loaded. Hitters have no idea that it's coming. I agree with you. I think it's probably the best pitch that I've seen, certainly in my time covering college softball. Jordyn, before we let you go, obviously you guys had an amazing run a year ago, a taste of that WCWS. With that so fresh in your mind, does it feel a little bit different as the postseason gets closer and closer this spring?
I think, in all honesty, the way we're thinking about this year is it's really different from last year. So especially, us fifth-year seniors, we're just excited to get to postseason. It doesn't feel any different. It doesn't feel, like there's anything really different from last year. We're just excited to get there and play and compete. And I think that's something that's really special to our team, that we don't really look too much into the past. We're ready for, the present and the future.
Northwestern catcher Jordyn Rudd, kind enough to join us on today's edition of Big Ten Today. Jordyn, we truly appreciate the time. Best of luck, not just this weekend, but through the course of the rest of the regular season and, of course, in the postseason as well.
Thank you. Go Cats.
It is time for today's big stat, fueled by Gatorade. Only one overall number one pick in the WNBA draft coming from the Big Ten. That was Minnesota's Janelle McCarville back in 2005. A couple years later, Jessica Davenport of Ohio State went number 2 overall, a spot matched by Minnesota's Amanda Zahui B. Remember, she was an international player, so she was able to leave a little bit early. And then just a few years ago, Ohio State's high-scoring Kelsey Mitchell, also the number 2 overall pick. And of course, this year's WNBA draft is set for Monday night. For more on that and all things women's college basketball, welcome in Sabrina Merchant of The Athletic. Sabrina, before we get to the WNBA draft, I do want to start with some of the big offseason news in women's college basketball. Louisville star Hailey Van Lith announcing that she will transfer away from Louisville, and there has been a lot of conversation about potential landing spots. The two most likely, at least the folks in Baton Rouge and Iowa City want to say, are LSU and Iowa. What are you hearing?
So my gut is that Hailey Van Lith isn't going to go too far from what she already knows. So I would expect an ACC school, given that she spent the last 3 years at Louisville, or perhaps something in the Pacific Northwest, maybe Pac-12 wise, just because that's where she's from. This is a player who really, really wants to win, and to plop into an entirely new situation where she's unfamiliar with the brand of basketball played in the conference and, things of that nature. I just don't see that happening with a player of her stature. So as fun as it would be to see her to play next to Caitlin Clark again, like she did on USA Basketball, I don't see that happening. Maybe LSU, they could use a guard, but I think we could probably find a different location than those top 2 spots.
All right, well, that certainly would disappoint those in black and gold, but understandable. LSU does maybe seem to make some sense because she certainly has a relationship on previous teams with current Tigers head coach Kim Mulkey. I would argue that women's college basketball, Sabrina, is in as good a spot as it's ever been, certainly since we've been covering it here on the Big Ten Network for the past 15 or 16 seasons. How much of that do you think is because of the WNBA draft rules, obviously different from the NBA? You have to be at least 22 or graduated from school, and it keeps players like those we've mentioned, Van Lith, Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, Aaliyah Boston, in school and a lot of times on the same team for multiple years.
Yeah, I think that continuity is obviously a big part of it. You know, just being able to root for the same players for 4 years in a row. Like you talk about Caitlin Clark, that Iowa team, their starting lineup played together for 93 games, which is just unheard of even in professional circles. So to be able to have that kind of continuity just to develop teams together and market and develop a fan base, I think is really important. But, you know, the WNBA draft rules have been like that forever. So I think a big part of what's happening with college basketball is just more opportunities being given to put them on national television, right? We saw the championship game being put on ABC for the first time, which obviously drew a really, really big number in terms of viewership. I think the modernization of the rules in college basketball on the women's side helps quite a bit, just making the game feel more modern for fans who are coming in from a, you know, professional fan perspective, like moving to 4 quarters that are each 10 minutes and the foul rules. And, you know, as much as I enjoy the single bonus as much as anyone on the men's college basketball side, it still feels very weird and gimmicky. And just to have that consistency of, you know, rules and gameplay on the women's side, I think helps quite a bit in terms of drawing fans from both an international perspective and a professional perspective. So I think, you know, there's a lot of factors at work in making the game more accessible these days, but, you know, definitely having players for up to 5 years can't hurt.
Sabrina, do you feel like the sport of women's college basketball maybe risks losing some of this momentum if it goes more the way that the men's game has gone, and that being so many players into the transfer portal every year? I understand that with a lot of the blue bloods knocked out of this year's men's tournament, that's a reason that the interest and the viewership was down. But you could also make an argument, a lot of the fans are not familiar with these players because they are one-year players coming from a different school or leaving. If more college basketball stars on the women's side go the route of Van Lith or Sedona Prince, who's leaving Oregon to go to TCU, does the sport risk losing some of the momentum it's built?
You know, I think the transfer portal adds to the momentum a little bit because we're talking about the sport so much more during the off season. And as long as players like Haley Van Lith are more of a one-off, you know, we're not talking about every single All-American who's thinking about transferring, right? It's just her and Anissa Morrow, who were, you know, third team and honorable mention All-Americans. So as long as we're dealing with that level of, you know, volume in the transfer portal where it's not every major star that we're worried about leaving schools, just a few enough to drive the conversation but not fundamentally change the composition of these top teams, I think it's really great for the sport just in terms of, you know, bringing up the discussion more often. But, you know, the more that we get to like first team All-Americans wanting to change teams regularly during the offseason, then it might be more of a, you know, conversation that needs to be had whether it's good for the sport or not.
All right, let's transition to Monday night's WNBA draft. Widely considered a lock at number 1 is Aaliyah Boston of South Carolina. Indiana needs a post presence. She definitely provides that. A lot of the mocks I've seen has former Maryland star Diamond Miller going number 2 overall to Minnesota. In your opinion, how likely is it that the Lynx choose Miller with that number 2 pick?
I think Diamond to Minnesota is almost as likely as Aaliyah Boston is to Indiana. She's just such a phenomenal player. Her size, her athleticism, her ability to get to the basket, just the way that she can take control of a game with her scoring and her playmaking. She's such a devastating force in transition. I mean, in talking to GMs and front office people before the start of this draft, like the compliments for Diamond Miller were almost as high as they were for Aaliyah Boston. She's just had a phenomenal season at Maryland, a phenomenal career at Maryland. And I really think that she has everything that she needs to be able to succeed at the WNBA level. I mean, obviously teams want to see her develop that 3-point shot a little bit more, but the fact that she's been able to succeed so much already without that jumper, and you really still can't find ways to guard her, I think it just bodes really well for her pro success. So yeah, I'd be shocked if she was on the board after Minnesota picked. Like, she's a perfect fit there in terms of what they need, just more dynamism, more perimeter scoring. So yeah, Miller to the Lynx seems like a pretty good lock too.
We spoke with her last Friday. I told her about those mocks and how much sense it seemed to make. She said she wasn't listening to any of it, wouldn't believe any of it until she actually heard her name called at number 2. Now, by many, Indiana's Grace Berger, who was injured early in the year but then came back and had such a strong second half, is considered to be maybe the Big Ten's second best WNBA prospect. Where do you think she lands in the first round?
Yeah, I love Berger's point guard skills. I think this is kind of a weird draft in terms of not really having any true point guards, but Grace played a lot of lead guard when she was at Indiana, runs a mean pick and roll. I think any team that's sort of desperate for a backup point guard would do really well to select Berger. I think Minnesota honestly makes a lot of sense just because they don't have a lot of point guard help. I'm not sure if she lasts all the way to 12. I've seen a lot of interest in Berger from Seattle and from the Los Angeles Sparks, so they're picking at 9 and 10. Quite possible that Grace lands there as well, but I just think a player who's ready to go like she is, like her body is WNBA ready. She's just a physical defender, really good help instincts. I think she'll be able to make an impact right away, like on a second unit for a WNBA team. So even a team that's looking to contend right away this season would do well to pick up Grace. I love the fit in Minnesota just because they do have that need for a little bit extra playmaking. I don't think they really even have a starting caliber point guard right now, but the more and more I look at this draft, the less likely I think it is that she falls all the way to number 12.
Minnesota with 2 picks in that first round. Leah Brown is the Big Ten's other most likely first-round pick. What's her appeal?
Yeah, a lot like Berger in that she is an awesome mid-range shooter, and you wonder how much that translates to the pro level because the game is, expanding so much beyond the three-point line, and how useful is it to have a guard whose bread and butter offense comes from mid-range. But the fact that she and Berger are so good from that distance, just gives you a lot of hope that at least they have to be guarded differently when they're conducting a pick and roll. Leah's a little interesting to me because she did so much of the playmaking for Michigan because they didn't really have a true point guard. And I don't think that's going to be her role in the WNBA because just defensively, she profiles more as a wing. And I kind of wonder how she's going to work off the ball because she's so good with the ball in her hands. If she were to, expand that shooting range a little bit to the three-point range, I'd be a lot more confident in her ability to stick. As it is, she's a super plus passer, especially at the wing, can get to her spots pretty much whenever she wants with the dribble. Defensively, I think the Big Ten as a whole left a little something to be desired defensively during this tournament, but I think just the way that she improved over those years at Michigan gives you some hope that she could stick, especially if some team takes her in the second round. I think that's probably the right landing spot for Leah Brown.
All right, Sabrina, we have about 45 seconds left. I do want to touch on Iowa's Monica Czinano, who had such an outstanding college career. How does her game translate to the next level?
Yeah, Monica's height gives just a little bit of pause when it comes to projecting her against WNBA centers because she's only about 6'2", and you'd want her to be 6'4" to really have a chance of holding up against the best WNBA bigs. But just her ability to finish, no matter the angle, I really do think that there is a spot for that on second units. She was able to finish against 6'7" Camila Cardoso from South Carolina, without too much difficulty. She's such a good pick and roll finisher. Just her movement, her ability to make all of these shots without dribbling. I think she's just a really, truly unique player. I kind of see some Naz Hillman vibes with her, and that she's going to have to fill out other parts of her game if she wants to, evolve and play at the WNBA level. But the good thing is she's already taken the MCAT and seems pretty prepared for medical school. But I love her game so much. I just worry that, we looked at Megan Gustafson and she had to transform into this 3-point bomber to survive with the Phoenix Mercury. And, that kind of would take away so much of what makes Monica Czinano special. So it's interesting. I just think she's such a wonderful college player. I'm not sure if the WNBA is the right place for her to showcase all of those skills.
Yeah, as long as she lands somewhere where a coach doesn't want the post player to dribble. Sabrina Merchant of The Athletic, we truly appreciate all the time and insight heading into Monday night's WNBA draft. Thanks for being with us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Heady times in State College. Penn State may have had one of the quietest multi-double-digit win seasons last year, and then they add the number 2 recruiting class in the country. I know you're always dealing with Ohio State. You're always dealing with Michigan, but there is a lot to talk about as Penn State gets ready for its annual Blue-White Spring Game coming up this weekend in State College. And with that in mind, we check in with Audrey Snyder of The Athletic. There are very few, if any, out there who cover Penn State as well in as much depth as Audrey. So, Audrey, let's focus on this team, and we look ahead not just to the spring game, but obviously to a very highly anticipated 2023 season, and we always start at quarterback. I called the spring game last year, and Drew Aller stepped onto that field. He looked lost. He looked scared. And then he made that huge jump between the spring and the fall. He became the guy everybody expected. What's expected of him, and how much is he being pushed by Bo Perbula?
Yeah, it always starts with the quarterback, right? Drew reminded us this spring, which I thought was a very, very good reminder, very insightful from him to kind of be able to read the room. He's like, hey, guys, remember, I'm 19. And I think that kind of sets the tone because you look at it and everybody's expecting Drew Aller to deliver the world to Penn State. I mean, you have the five-star prospect. He was Sean Clifford's backup last year, got a lot of valuable game reps. And now they're billing it this spring as a quarterback competition because as we know with James Franklin, he's not just going to come out here and say, hey, this is our starter. But they've talked about potentially having a package for Bo Perbula. It's something that we've seen in the past. Now, what it looks like, we haven't seen that, of course, and I don't think we'll be seeing that Saturday. But we've seen it in the past with Tommy Stevens. We've seen them go to Will Levis at various points. And I think it's how do you keep your backup quarterback engaged in this day and age of the transfer portal? Because the reality is, I mean, Drew became the backup last year after he'd only been on campus for a few months. So, yeah, all eyes will absolutely be on him Saturday afternoon at Beaver Stadium.
Great point. Got to keep that number 2 quarterback happy in today's day and age of college football. Talk about 2 guys in that backfield that will join Aller, who may make up the best returning backfield in all of college football when you talk about what Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen did a year ago. Should we expect any difference at all in the way that they're used coming into their sophomore seasons?
You know, the only thing that I'll say with that is I think, and Singleton has told us this offseason a few times, he wants to catch more passes. And I think, you look at him, you look at his speed, getting him in space a little bit more would be a heck of a weapon for Penn State. But yeah, I mean, this is an insanely good backfield, and they've kind of addressed already their biggest question this spring in that backfield is who is that number 3 running back? Well, then they go out this past week, and Trey Potts announced that he's coming in from Minnesota. So, you get a Williamsport, Pennsylvania guy coming back home. So it's like, okay, you've had a really, really good depth in that room. Now you just added to it. So, yeah, to me, Singleton catching more passes out of the backfield, I think is what you're going to see. But they've worked so well in tandem together. And, you can make the argument last year that maybe Katron Allen should have been the freshman of the year. But 2 insanely talented backs. So it's a very good problem for Penn State to have.
All right, more on catching passes. It seems like Harrison Wallace, Keandre Lambert-Smith are the top 2 guys right now at that spot. But what are you hearing about the FSU transfer, Malik McLean? Who else may be interested in watching at the spring game?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, when we've been out at spring practices, it's difficult to miss Malik McLean because he's 6'4". There's noticeable size to this guy. And he actually was one of Sean Clifford's receivers at Pro Day. And so that was really the first kind of extended look we've seen of him. So besides drill work and practice, I'm curious to see what he can do on Saturday. But yeah, what this receiving core kind of is comprised of is the biggest question, because you're right. Keandre Lambert-Smith, he's making his case to be that number 1 guy. I mean, Dante Cephas will get here after spring ball. That's the plan. So, who that number 1 is, if it's Lambert-Smith, if Cephas, who everyone is super high on, can push for that role, we'll see. But yeah, Amari Evans is a guy that I think a lot of people, we saw him last year, I think they're going to be talking about. Caden Saunders is somebody else, came in here super highly touted, took a red shirt last year, and was really honest, but also hard on himself when he got here last year. He said he wasn't fully prepared. He had to kind of change his body composition to get ready to play at this level. So you look at the speed element there with Caden Saunders, and it's super enticing, has to be exciting. But I think, again, you've got a new position coach. So it's been a clean slate. And to me, that receiving core is the one position group on Saturday that everybody is going to want to see kind of who emerges, because James Franklin said it himself a few times this spring. They feel like there's 5 or 6 guys competing for that number 3 spot, and that's going to carry on all summer.
James Franklin also says he loves that tight end room. Obviously, Brenton Strange is gone. Could be an NFL draft sleeper, according to a lot of guys. But Theo Johnson, Tyler Warren, Khalil Dinkins, all back. Audrey, I think it's fair to say the one unit that we seem to have questions about every year since James Franklin took over is the offensive line. What is the outlook right now up front heading into 2023?
It's as good as if not best as it's ever been when James Franklin's been here. I mean, you look at it, you get Olu Fashanu back, your left tackle who they missed down the stretch. I mean, this is a guy who could be preparing for the NFL draft right now, a projected first-round pick. Getting him back for another year was massive. I think a lot of people maybe forget how many injuries Penn State had up front last year. So the fact that they were able to overcome all of that is really significant. And then I think you're going to start to see kind of them reaping so many of the rewards of all those moving parts last year. Right tackle, Caden Wallace is having a pretty nice spring, but what does Drew Shelton do there? He's somebody that they have working on the right side right now, so that's a competition. You've got a new center with Hunter Norzad and Nick Dawkins both competing for time there. So you have some moving parts, but the depth is incredibly good. And as we saw last year, there's a lot of talent up front right now.
Defensively, I want to start on the back end because that secondary has just been so good for multiple years running. Yes, Joey Porter and Jair Brown are gone, but you get an all-ACC transfer in Storm Duck, who is also immediately part of the all-name team inside the Big Ten. He comes from North Carolina, and there's a lot of pieces that are returning to that secondary. Is it crazy to think it can be as good or close to as good this year as it was a year ago?
I actually don't think that's crazy. I mean, on the surface, it might sound a little kind of a little crazy when you say it, but once you start looking at it, Kalen King is somebody who that they're going to need him to be the shutdown corner, and a lot of guys are super high on him. And for a long time, Penn State has been, and what I found really interesting was as Joey Porter went throughout the pre-draft process, he said so many teams and scouts were saying, hey, what can you tell us about this kid maybe for next year, Kalen King? So yeah, I do think the talent is there in that secondary. You look at a guy like Johnny Dixon. Now, to me, kind of the question is, it's at safety, who else steps up there? There's a lot of talent in the room. We've seen it from Jalen Reed. We've seen Zakee Wheatley, but you're losing a lot with Jair Brown, but also in his leadership ability. He was somebody that when something needed to be said, he would kind of be the guy to take over. So to me, like there's that void, but also Brown's versatility is something a lot of guys have touched on this spring. They went to that exotic, that third down prowler package. Yes, it was exciting for a lot of guys because they all want to be Jair Brown, who could blitz, he could do all these different things out of the prowler package. But who's going to be that guy? And I think cornerback Johnny Dixon is someone who will get some of those opportunities. But yeah, there's a ton of talent that Manny Diaz has to work with. So it's a good problem. But I don't think you're crazy saying that it could be just as good, which I think, a lot of people are going to maybe have their minds blown later on this month when Joey Porter Jr. becomes the first Penn State defensive back ever drafted in the first round.
Yeah, that's really hard to believe that statistic could be true. Of course, it is known as linebacker U, and so you have a lot of linebacker conversation. Now, last year, it was about who's going to fill in the middle. This year, the talk appears to be more positive, and it appears to be focused on a young fella on the outside by the name of Tony Rojas, who apparently is blowing people's minds during spring practice. Audrey, what are you hearing? What should we know about this guy?
Well, my jaw actually dropped last week when James Franklin said Tony Rojas gained 29 pounds since he got here in January. And I was like, wait, what? Like, did he actually say 29? And then talking with other teammates about Rojas, they said, yeah, he's gained a significant amount of weight since he got here, but they're classifying it all as good weight, right? So this is somebody who is a high school running back. So you look at it, there are teams that thought Tony Rojas could be a running back in college, and he's coming out of Fairfax High School. So it's not like, it's a small school by any stretch. Like, this is a legitimate prospect at multiple positions. But yeah, I mean, the athleticism is crazy. He's somebody who I think right away, we've seen more and more players here burning red shirts and burning them early and making significant impacts. And to me, Rojas is probably going to be one of those guys. Now, we'll see what that role looks like because there is more talent now at linebacker than they've had in the past, but maybe they get him into special teams right away. But absolutely, I want to keep an eye on him on Saturday because as soon as they said that weight gain, I said, wait, is this like a legitimate thing? And it is. So Tony Rojas is kind of the surprise pick of spring right now.
Yes, to be a teen where 29 pounds of additional weight can actually be classified as good weight. So far beyond those days. Yep. Audrey Snyder, as always, great stuff heading into this weekend's blue-white spring game. We appreciate all the insight, Audrey.
You got it. Take care.